Welcome to today's devotional message, part of the Trusting God Always series. You prayed, you fasted, you waited, and still, silence. Maybe this message is the sign you didn't know you needed. If these words meet you right where you are, like, share, and subscribe. It helps us reach more souls who need God's comfort. Comment below with your favorite Bible promise, or the one you're still holding on to in the waiting. Let's begin, and let His Word breathe new life into yours. You sit by the window, the late afternoon sun casting long, melancholy shadows across the room. Dust motes dance in the slanted light, oblivious to the stillness that grips your soul. Your phone sits beside you, a dark mirror reflecting your own anxious face. It is silent. The email inbox, tauntingly accessible on the nearby screen, remains stubbornly, heartbreakingly empty. The answer you desperately poured out your heart for, the breakthrough you pleaded for, hasn't arrived. Not a whisper, not a sign, nothing. It feels like an eternity, though it's only been days, weeks, maybe stretching into months, since you first laid this specific thing before God. This job application that felt like the perfect fit. This relationship status hanging in painful limbo. This health concern that casts a long shadow. This deep longing for a breakthrough. This quiet, persistent ache for change. You remember those prayers, whispered late at night, fervent pleas choked with tears. Maybe even a hesitant attempt to bargain, promising more faith, more surrender, if only. You felt it in your spirit. You felt sure this was it. The promise felt close, almost tangible. The timing seemed so divinely orchestrated. And the need, the need is so very, very real. And now, only silence. Not the peaceful, restorative silence of a mountaintop or a quiet forest path, but a heavy, oppressive quiet, thick with unspoken questions and rising doubts. It presses in on you, a weight on your chest. You try to conjure faith, rummaging through mental archives of sermons heard, verses memorized. You recall teachings about patience, about God's perfect timing, about the refining fire of waiting. You try to speak those truths to your heart, to command your soul to believe. But in the stark, quiet reality of this room, facing the undeniable fact of your unanswered plea, those truths feel distant, like faint echoes from another world. Beautiful in theory, but powerless against the raw, exposed nerve of disappointment. A quiet whisper of, "Did I hear wrong?" Or "Does he even care about this specific small thing?" snakes into your thoughts, corrosive and cold. This isn't just waiting in line at the grocery store. It feels like being actively forgotten, overlooked in the grand, sweeping narrative of God's unfolding plan. You look out the window, watching the world outside continue its relentless forward motion. Cars driving by, people walking dogs, the sun dipping lower, while you feel utterly stuck, paused in a holding pattern you didn't choose, didn't understand. It feels like the whole universe is moving on, leaving you marooned on this silent, waiting island. Yet, deep beneath the layers of disappointment and the confusing fog of doubt, a tiny ember of hope refuses to be extinguished. It's not a roaring fire, not even a steady flame, but a persistent, stubborn glow. It is the illogical, persistent belief that maybe, just maybe, God is in this silence. Maybe He is working in ways you cannot see, speaking in frequencies you cannot yet hear. Maybe His presence is most potent when you feel Him least. It is the paradoxical truth that sometimes his silence is his loudest answer, compelling you to listen with a different kind of ear, to look with a different kind of sight. This moment, this quiet ache in your chest, this season of waiting that feels like an eternity, it is precisely here, in this raw, exposed space, that the Spirit wants to meet you. He wants to reveal a deeper truth about what trust truly means when the path is dark, about divine timing that transcends human calendars, and about His unwavering, undeniable presence even when all you perceive is absence. This message is for you, sitting there in the quiet room, wondering if God still remembers your name, if your prayer mattered, if hope is foolish. It is a whispered reminder that even in the heaviest silence, you are not alone. The wind might tap the window pane, not just as a sign of changing weather, but like God's whisper waiting for your stillness, inviting you into a deeper place of trusting Him always. Remember that moment, the raw prayer you offered, the one where you held nothing back, tears perhaps streaming down your face, laying it all at His feet. You felt a release, a sense of having done your part, believing the answer was now just around the corner. And then, nothing. The heavens seemed closed. Your words seemed to vanish into a void, leaving no ripple, no sign of being heard. It's in these moments that faith is truly tested, isn't it? Not in the mountaintop experiences, but in the desolate valleys where your fervent prayer is met only with the echo of your own voice. You sit there, in the quiet aftermath, wrestling with the silence. Was I not earnest enough? Was my faith too small? Did I ask for the wrong thing? The questions spiral, each one a tiny chip eroding the foundation of hope you just laid bare. The silence presses in, a heavy blanket smothering the flicker of expectation. It feels like the wilderness, vast, empty, devoid of immediate sustenance or direction. This quiet isn't just lack of sound, it feels like lack of presence, like being forgotten in the cosmic hum. Fears you thought prayer would conquer rise again. The anxiety about the future, the ache of loss unhealed, the doubt about God's willingness or even His ability. Your oil lamp feels dim, threatening to extinguish in the unseen winds of waiting. But what if this silence isn't proof of God's absence, but rather an invitation into a deeper posture, an invitation that moves beyond simply asking for outcomes and delves into the profound mystery of seeking the giver Himself, regardless of the visible answer? The seed of faith sometimes must be buried in the dark earth of silence before it can sprout. It's in the hidden season, like the prophet in the belly of the whale, or the disciples waiting after ascension, that a different kind of strength is forged. God is often loudest, not in the dramatic answer, but in the quiet, refining fire of waiting. He is working, sculpting your heart, teaching you to lean not on the seeing, but on the being. His being ever present, ever faithful. The paradox? You find fullness, not in the void being immediately filled, but in discovering His presence within the void. You find strength, not in the external problem being solved, but in the internal posture of surrender, settling deep within your soul. He is not asking for a loud shout of faith in the storm. Sometimes, He simply invites you to rest in the boat, trusting the One who sleeps beside you. This quiet space, this apparent void, is holy ground. It is here, stripped of visible reassurances, that true dependence takes root. like a river finding its truest course through the challenging terrain. Don't abandon the quiet. Lean into it. Listen differently. Let your seeking shift from the answer to the author of your story. His promise isn't always an immediate rescue from the valley, but an unwavering presence through it. Sit in the stillness. He is closer than the echo. You sit in the silence, the weight of unspoken words pressing down. You've poured out your heart before, whispered needs into the quiet air, perhaps even cried out in anguish until your voice was hoarse. And the return? An echo. A deafening silence where you longed for a whisper, a sign, a movement. Maybe you've asked God this too. Are you still listening? Do you see this pain, this need, this unanswered longing? It's a question that gnaws at the edges of faith, an ancient query carved into the human soul during seasons of drought. You feel the sting of it when the report comes back negative, when the phone doesn't ring, when the door remains resolutely shut despite your persistent knocking. It's a question as old as the Psalms, voiced by kings and prophets who walked intimately with the divine, yet still felt the crushing weight of abandonment in their darkest hours. The psalmist cried out, his voice raw with perceived distance, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? From the words of my groaning. Psalm 22:1. This isn't just an ancient lament. It's the present pulse of a heart wrestling with the disconnect between a promised present God and a felt, distant reality. You are not alone in feeling unheard. Millions have stood exactly where you stand, looking out at the vast wilderness of waiting, wondering if their signal is even reaching heaven's gate. This feeling, this gnawing doubt, can lead to a spiritual paralysis, a hesitance that creeps into your soul, whispering, "Why bother praying? It won't make a difference." Your words are lost in the cosmic ether. You begin to question the very foundations of your faith, not just God's willingness, but His capability, His presence in the face of your very specific, very real need. The storm rages around you. Maybe it's a storm of financial crisis, a health battle, relational breakdown, or the quiet erosion of hope in a dream deferred. And in the eye of that storm, surrounded by the tempest of your circumstances, you shout your prayers into the wind, and the wind just whips them back into your face. It feels like God isn't listening. The silence isn't empty. It's filled with the loud, insistent voice of your fears, amplifying every unanswered question, turning every delayed promise into a potential denial. Your spirit grows weary, like an oil lamp flickering in the oppressive darkness of a prolonged night, threatening to go out completely. You see others' lamps burning brightly, their prayers seemingly met with swift, visible answers, and the contrast sharpens the ache of your own perceived neglect. Is He only listening to them? Is there something wrong with my prayer, my faith? But Scripture, the bedrock of our hope, offers a powerful counter-narrative to this human experience of doubt and distance. It assures us, with unwavering clarity, that God's ear is always attentive to the cries of His children. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. Psalm 34:17. The Psalms, which give voice to the deepest human struggles, are also saturated with the assurance of God's ever-present ear and His active response. He is near to all who call on Him, to all who call on Him in truth. Psalm 145:18. This isn't conditional. It's a statement of His very nature. His listening isn't dependent on the volume of your prayer, the eloquence of your words, or even the perceived strength of your faith in that moment of desperation. It is dependent on His unchanging character. The feeling of not being heard is a human experience in the waiting. It is not the divine reality of His presence. Your feeling is valid. It is real to you. God does not dismiss your pain or the ache of the silence. He met the psalmist in that same valley. He understands the human struggle of reconciling faith with unanswered questions and delayed gratification. But your feeling, powerful as it is not the ultimate truth of the situation. The truth is, He is closer than you imagine, even when He seems furthest away. He is listening with an attentiveness that transcends human comprehension, an ear tuned not just to your words, but to the groanings of your spirit, the unspoken needs of your heart. He heard you before you even formed the words. Consider the mustard seed of faith, seemingly small and insignificant in the face of mountainous obstacles and silent heavens. That seed is not unheard. Its potential is known, nurtured by the unseen hand of the gardener. Your quiet, struggling prayer, barely a whisper in your own perception, is a shout in the spiritual realm, reaching the throne of grace instantly. What if the silence isn't God's absence, but His method? What if the waiting isn't proof of not being heard, but proof of a perfect timing you cannot yet perceive? Sometimes He answers not with a booming voice or a sudden dramatic rescue, but with a quiet strengthening of your spirit, a subtle shift in perspective, an unexpected peace settling over the storm. Maybe you've begged for clarity in the wilderness of decision, but God gave you peace instead. The peace that assures you He is with you, guiding you step by step. That was His answer, tailored precisely to your deepest need, though it didn't look like the answer you expected. Don't let the feeling of being unheard lead to spiritual paralysis. Don't allow the enemy to convince you that your prayers bounce off a brass sky. Your heavenly Father bends low to listen to you. He sees the tears you cry in secret. He knows the fear that knots your stomach when you face the uncertainty ahead. He heard you the first time you called out, and He hears you still. The invitation is not to strive harder to be heard, but to surrender deeper into the truth that you are heard. His attention isn't something you earn. It is a gift of His boundless love. Release the need for the answer to look a certain way or arrive on your schedule. Focus on the profound, liberating truth that the Creator of the cosmos, the sustainer of all life, inclines His ear to you. Take a moment now, in the quiet space of your heart. Breathe deeply. Instead of reciting your list of needs again, simply acknowledge His presence. Speak His name. Trust that the very act of turning your heart towards Him is met with His immediate, loving attention. His listening isn't passive. It is active, compassionate, and leads to His perfect response in His perfect time. Your prayers are not lost in the wind. They are gathered into the heart of God, held there with infinite care until the moment of their unfolding. The silence you perceive is merely the pause between your question and His perfect, timely answer, a pause filled not with absence, but with the unseen work of His hands. You are not unheard. You are held in His loving gaze, every whispered prayer cherished. You watch the calendar pages turn, each tick a reminder of the promise not yet seen. You've walked through seasons of hopeful anticipation, through deserts of gnawing doubt, asking, "How long, O Lord?" The silence stretches, vast and echoing, and you begin to fear that your story is stuck, a forgotten chapter in God's grand narrative. Is this delay a sign you were wrong? Is it punishment? Or is it something else entirely? The weight of the unseen presses down, threatening to crush the fragile hope you cling to. You wonder if your faith is simply not strong enough to rush the divine clock. But look closely at the tapestry of redemptive history, and you see a recurring pattern woven into its very fabric, the pattern of delay. This isn't a glitch in God's plan. It's often a significant, purposeful part of it. Think of Abraham, promised a son who would father nations, yet he waited decades, his body and Sarah's beyond natural hope, before Isaac arrived. Consider Joseph, receiving dreams of leadership, only to be thrown into a pit by his brothers, sold into slavery, and unjustly imprisoned for years before standing before Pharaoh. Recall Moses, raised in palaces, yet spending 40 years tending sheep in the wilderness before being called to lead Israel. The Israelites themselves endured 400 years of bondage in Egypt before liberation came. Even Jesus, the Messiah, waited 30 silent years before beginning his public ministry, and his disciples, after his ascension, were told to wait for the promised Holy Spirit before beginning their world-altering work. Waiting isn't the opposite of God's movement. Often, waiting is the movement. It's the unseen preparation, the refining fire, the stretching of capacity. God's greatest works often unfold not instantly, like a flicked switch, but through seasons of patient anticipation and hidden growth, like a seed buried in the earth, waiting for its time. In these delays, God is not absent. He is actively shaping, strengthening, and preparing. He uses the wilderness to strip away the old self, the pit to cultivate dependence, the long years to build resilience. The wait isn't emptiness, it's preparation. The delay isn't denial, it's divine timing. Sometimes, the promise can only be received after the heart has been pruned by the waiting. He asks you to trust the author, even when you cannot see the end of the chapter you're currently in. Perhaps he is not withholding the promise, but preparing you to receive it in a way that honors him most deeply. Quiet your heart for a moment. Where are you feeling the weight of delay today? What promise feels perpetually postponed? Offer that uncertainty, that fear, that fatigue, back to the one who authored delay into the stories of faith's greatest heroes. Trust that he is working even in the silence, shaping not just the outcome, but you in the process. You sit in the quiet space, perhaps in your own form of confinement, maybe just the confinement of circumstance. You feel the unfairness of it all pressing in, like hands pushing you down into a pit you didn't dig. You didn't ask for this waiting. You didn't earn this rejection. This isn't the life you planned, not even close. The air feels heavy, thick with unanswered questions and the echoes of betrayal or loss. Why here? Why me? Why now? Imagine Joseph, a boy gifted, favored, given vivid, breathtaking dreams straight from the heart of God. Dreams of stars bowing, of sheaves of grain bending. Dreams that promised a future far grander than his present reality. Then the pit. His own brothers, fueled by bitter envy, stripped him bare and threw him into a dark, empty cistern. A place of abandonment, isolation, and certain death, had a caravan not passed by. Sold into slavery, ripped from everything he knew, dragged to Egypt, a foreign land. For years, he served in Potiphar's house, faithful, diligent. God's favor evident even there. But the darkness found him again. Falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, he was thrown into prison. Not just a jail cell, but likely a dungeon, a place of suffering and forgottenness. Years melted away. 2 years after interpreting dreams for fellow prisoners, forgotten by the cupbearer he helped. Joseph had every conceivable reason to despair, to rail against the heavens, to curse the God who gave him those dreams, only to seemingly abandon him to the pit and the prison. He could have become a bitter, resentful man, consumed by the injustice of his fate. He had lost his family, his freedom, his reputation. His dreams felt like cruel mockeries whispered in the dark. Yet the scripture offers a quiet, powerful truth in Genesis 39:21. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him steadfast love, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. God was with him, not saving him from the pit and prison immediately, but in the pit and prison. These weren't simply periods of suffering. They were profound, difficult, unavoidable classrooms. The pit stripped him of pride and privilege, teaching him absolute dependence. The years of slavery taught him humility and resilience under pressure. The prison, a place designed for crushing spirits, became his training ground. In that confinement, God taught him patience, perseverance in hope when circumstances screamed hopelessness. He learned forgiveness long before he faced his brothers again, processing the deep wounds in the solitude of his cell. He honed leadership skills by managing the prison affairs entrusted by the keeper. Most importantly, he learned absolute, unwavering dependence on God's favor. The one constant when everything else was stripped away. The world saw a forgotten prisoner. God saw a future prime minister being refined. Your season of waiting, the difficulty you face right now, whether it feels like a suffocating pit, a lonely wilderness, or an unjust prison of circumstance, is also a potential classroom. It may feel dark, unfair, and unending, but like Joseph, God is not absent. He is with you. This waiting isn't empty time. It's weighted time, heavy with potential lessons. God can use this pressure to teach you a depth of perseverance you never knew you had. He can use the silence to cultivate a listening ear for His quiet voice. He can use the frustration to build unwavering faith that stands firm when the world is shaking. He can use the injustice to forge a capacity for grace and forgiveness. Perhaps God is teaching you to trust His presence in the storm, not just His power to calm it. Maybe He is showing you that true freedom isn't the absence of walls, but the presence of His Spirit within them. You don't need to see the entire blueprint. You are being asked to trust the architect in the dimly lit drafting room of delay. What if this waiting is less about God withholding something from you and more about Him building something in you? What if the skills, the character, the depth of faith required for the palace of your promise can only be forged in the prison of your present reality? Lean into the discomfort. Ask Him what this classroom is meant to teach you. Surrender the timeline and embrace the lesson. God is still working, even when the work looks like waiting in the dark. 40 years. The dust settled on sandals worn thin by endless plains, under a sky that promised a homeland, a destination that remains stubbornly out of sight. A generation measured their lives not in years of dwelling, but in decades of wandering. They had walked through the impossible, the Red Sea, a wall of water held back by the breath of God Himself. They ate bread that fell from the sky, a miraculous catering service in the desolate void. They drank from a rock, water gushing forth in the most unlikely place, a testament to a presence that could conjure life from stone. Yet even with these divine signposts scattered along their path, the air filled not with worship, but with the low hum of discontent. The wilderness was not merely a physical space. It was a vast, unforgiving mirror reflecting the true posture of their hearts. God hadn't abandoned them there aimlessly. He led them deliberately, testing them, humbling them, allowing the harsh realities of scarcity and uncertainty to reveal what lay beneath the surface. It was, as the ancient words whisper, to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep His commandments or not. The test wasn't just about obedience to rules, but about the root of their trust. Did they believe the provider would provide, even when their eyes saw only barren ground? Did they believe the guide knew the way, even when the path ahead was obscured? Perhaps you know this wilderness well. You sit in a season that stretches out longer than you ever imagined. You have seen God's hand in your past, the unexpected provision, the wayward child returned, the closed door that protected you. You remember the moments when the waters parted, when the rock was struck. But now, the landscape feels empty, the future uncertain, and the waiting presses down, a heavy weight on your spirit. Are you finding yourself tracing the same weary circles, listening to the echo of your own complaints? Are your thoughts consumed by the lack of progress, the lack of clarity, the lack of the desired outcome? Or are you learning to look, truly look, for the daily manna of His grace, the small, consistent mercies that sustain you right now? Are you finding the rock of His unwavering presence in the solitude, the steady certainty amidst the shifting sands of your circumstances? Are you noticing the cloud of His guidance, subtle perhaps, but always moving, always leading, even when it feels like a slow crawl? The wilderness reveals that sometimes the longest way is the shortest path to a purified heart. Waiting isn't passive. It's an active state of becoming. It strips away self-reliance and forces you to lean on the unseen. It exposes whether your focus is solely on the destination, the promised land you long for, or if you are learning to trust the guide Himself on the journey. This waiting season, as difficult as it is, holds a sacred invitation to shift your gaze from the miles left to walk to the one walking with you. Let it not be a season defined by grumbling, but by the quiet, courageous pursuit of His presence in the ordinary, the mundane, the deeply uncomfortable moments of delay. Look for the manna today. Trust the rock beside you. Follow the cloud above you. Your heart's posture in the waiting whispers the truest story of your trust. Maybe you felt it, that profound, unsettling quiet. Not the calm quiet of rest, but the heavy silence that falls when your worst fears are realized. When the phone doesn't ring, when the news arrives, or when your most fervent prayers seem to disappear into an empty sky. It's the silence of the tomb. Think about them, the disciples, scattered, huddled in grief and fear. 3 days. 3 days of absolute silence from the one who had spoken storms to stillness, who had shouted life into the dead. Their hope, vibrant just days before, lay buried with Him. Their dreams of a conquering Messiah, a restored Israel, shattered like glass. Everything they believed, everything they invested, now lay behind a sealed stone, guarded by soldiers. Silence. Utter, devastating silence filled the void left by His absence. It wasn't just the quiet of a grave. It was the deafening quiet of unanswered questions, of crushed faith, of a future that had ceased to exist. This was their wilderness, their darkest valley, a place where the oil lamp of hope seemed to have finally flickered out. Perhaps your own story holds moments echoing that tomb. A silence after the diagnosis, the quiet rooms after a loved one is gone, the hush of rejection where you expected acceptance, the terrifying stillness of waiting for something that feels like it will never come, or worse, like it already died before it could be born. You sit in that quiet, the heavy stone of circumstance rolled across the entrance to your dreams, and the stillness screams one thing: it's over. Your heart, like theirs, feels buried. But step back, look closer at that historical silence. While the disciples saw only finality and felt only despair, something magnificent was being orchestrated in that very stillness. God was not silent because he was absent. He was silent because he was working, preparing the ultimate, universe-altering declaration of his power. The greatest victory wasn't shouted from a mountaintop or announced with trumpets before the tomb. It was forged in the silent, unseen depths within it. Life was preparing to explode from the place of death. This is the gentle paradox etched into the heart of faith. Sometimes, the deepest quiet is where God is doing his most powerful, life-restoring work. Your tomb-like silence, the place where your hopes feel buried and your faith is tested to its limits, might just be the sacred ground where God is preparing your resurrection story. He hasn't abandoned you in the stillness. He is refining, strengthening, and preparing you for a breakthrough you cannot yet conceive. He meets your fear of loss, not by preventing the tomb, but by promising that he holds the keys to resurrection. He meets your doubt not with easy answers, but with the quiet, unwavering presence that sustained him through the grave's preparation. Can you allow the terrifying quiet to become a holy quiet, trusting that even now, behind the stone, God is moving towards life? What if this silence isn't an end, but the breath held before the greatest reveal? What if the silence is simply God's sacred pause, preparing for the shout of victory? The calendar pages turn, but your situation feels frozen. You've sent the applications, had the conversations, prayed the prayers, but again and again, the silence stretches, and an old anxiety begins to tap at the window of your heart, mirroring the sound of rain outside. Your natural inclination screams, do something, force it, control the outcome. Waiting feels like drowning in inactivity, a passive state of powerlessness. You watch others move forward, seemingly effortlessly, while you remain fixed in place, unsure if you're even still on the path. This season, heavy with delay, presses down. It feels like a test you didn't sign up for, a wilderness you didn't choose. But what if this isn't inactivity? What if this quiet, frustrating season is the most active work God is doing within you? Consider the athlete holding a plank. It looks still, but every muscle in their core is screaming, engaging in active resistance. They are building strength precisely through the tension and the holding. Your waiting is not a pause from training. It is the training. It's the spiritual equivalent of holding a plank position, building a core resilience that can only be forged under the pressure of delay. The Apostle Paul understood this profound paradox when he wrote, "Suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, who has been given to us. Romans 5, 3-5. He doesn't say instant answers produce perseverance. He says suffering, the very tension, the friction, the delay, produces endurance. This waiting is cultivating perseverance, that gritty refusal to give up. Perseverance builds character, the kind forged in fire, not comfort. And character anchors hope. A hope not based on your timeline or control, but on the unwavering faithfulness of God, whose love floods your soul through His Spirit. The pause you resist is the process God intends. Every moment you choose not to despair, not to seize control in fear, not to abandon trust, you are flexing a spiritual muscle. You are actively enduring. This season is building something vital within you. It's developing an inner resilience, an endurance that transcends your natural ability, a muscle that understands deep in its spiritual fibers how to lean into God's strength precisely when yours feels depleted. This isn't about passive waiting. It's about active, trust-filled endurance. It requires you to lean into God when every fiber of your being wants to control, to force, or to crumble into despair. Look at this season not as a void, but as a forge. Trust the tension, trust the delay. It is building the spiritual muscle you will absolutely need for what God has next. Lean in. Hold on. He is present in the tension, strengthening you. You sit in the silence, wondering if your prayer was even heard. The wind taps the window, like God's whisper waiting for your stillness. It feels like a season of dryness, doesn't it? The ground around you feels hard, unyielding. You've pleaded for visible answers, for swift breakthroughs, for a clear sign that something, anything is happening. But the landscape remains unchanged, the circumstances stubbornly the same. This waiting feels less like a pause and more like being lost in a wilderness where the path forward is obscured and the promised land seems impossibly distant. Doubt, like a persistent vine, tries to wrap itself around your hope, whispering insidious questions. Is God listening? Does He care about this? Am I forgotten in this barren stretch of time? This is the soil of the unseen work. It's easy to measure growth by what breaks the surface: the first green shoot, the budding flower, the ripe fruit. But the life of a plant, its very survival, depends on the intricate network hidden beneath the soil. Think of the tree described in Jeremiah 17, 7-8. It is planted by streams of water. When the heat comes, when the dreaded season of scorching sun arrives, it does not fear. Why? Because its roots, unseen by human eyes, reach out by the channel. They draw life from a source that is not dependent on the rain that may or may not fall today, or the temperature of the air above ground. Its leaves remain green because its lifeblood flows from a hidden, constant supply. In these seasons that feel like darkness or dryness, when the heat of difficulty or the drought of unanswered prayer presses in, God is often doing His most vital work below the surface of your life. He is sending your roots deeper. While you are longing for visible movement, for things to change out there, He is focused on solidifying your foundation in here. Your roots are sinking further into the deep, cool waters of His truth. They are anchoring themselves around the bedrock of His unshakable promises. They are intertwining with the very character of God, His faithfulness, His love, His sovereignty, His unwavering goodness, even when things feel anything but good. This process is often uncomfortable. Deepening roots means breaking through hard soil, navigating unseen obstacles. It requires a trust that the source is still there, even when you can't see or feel the water immediately. It demands patience, a quiet surrender to a process you do not control and cannot fully comprehend in the moment. It feels slow, perhaps even stagnant, because the dramatic growth is happening out of sight. But the strength you gain in this hidden season is the strength that will define your resilience when the next storm inevitably arrives. Consider the paradox. The season that feels most barren is the season of deepest growth. The strength you gain is not in rising above the difficulty, but in sinking deeper into the divine life source within it. He makes you resilient not by removing the heat, but by deepening your roots in His cool, hidden stream. While you are waiting for the external to change, He is cultivating an internal fortitude, a spiritual muscle memory of leaning into His presence when all else feels unstable. This quiet work, this unnoticed digging, is forming the foundation that will allow you to bear fruit, to stand tall, to remain evergreen, no matter how fierce the heat or how long the drought. So, as you navigate this season of quiet waiting, this perceived darkness, resist the urge to focus solely on the surface. Trust that God is working in ways you cannot see. Your prayer may feel unanswered, but perhaps His answer is not a change in circumstances yet, but a deepening of your roots in Him. He is using the very pressure of the waiting to drive you down into a more profound intimacy with His character, a more secure reliance on His promises. This waiting is not wasted time. It is sacred ground where resilience is cultivated and your connection to the unfailing source is made unbreakable. The difficulty isn't the point. The deepening is. And the strength being forged in this unseen season will carry you through everything that lies ahead. It is the quiet work that prepares you to stand unshaken. The days stretch into weeks, then months, perhaps even years. You look at the barren landscape of your present, the place where you planted a seed of prayer so long ago, and wonder if it will ever break through the hardened earth. This waiting feels like a wilderness, an endless expanse of sameness, where hope begins to thin like a mirage. The anxiety whispers doubts. Did God forget? Was my prayer wrong? Is the answer simply no? It's in this crucible of delay, this agonizing stillness, that we confront perhaps the most challenging truth about trusting God. His timing is not our timing, and His delay is not His denial. He has indeed made everything beautiful in its time. This isn't just a poetic phrase, it's a divine principle. Just as the seed must remain hidden, drawing strength and structure in the darkness underground before bursting forth, so too do some of God's greatest blessings take root and develop unseen within the soil of waiting. What feels excruciatingly slow to our limited view, bound by the ticking clock and the ache of unmet longing, is often a part of a perfect, divine strategy orchestrated by a God who sees the entire tapestry, not just the single thread you are holding. Perhaps He is waiting for you to be fully ready, for the soil of your heart to be prepared to receive the full weight and wonder of the blessing He intends. Maybe there are lessons of patience, resilience, or deeper dependence He knows you need to learn in the quiet, hidden season. Or perhaps the delay is about the alignment of other people, circumstances, and events you cannot even perceive. complex movements on a divine chessboard far beyond our comprehension. Sometimes, His holding back is an act of protection, shielding you from something you cannot see, a storm brewing on the horizon that His timing will allow you to avoid entirely. Trusting His timing demands a surrender of our finite perspective. We see only the moment. He sees the beginning, the middle, and the glorious end. It asks us to trade our urgent now for His perfect then, believing that His delay, however painful, is ultimately working for your deepest good and His greatest glory. It's a gentle paradox, finding stillness and surrender in the restless energy of waiting. He isn't asking you to understand the timing, only to trust the timekeeper. Lean into the quiet call to reflection, allowing the truth of His perfect time to soften the edges of your impatience and renew your trust in the One who orchestrates all things beautifully. The lampstand may feel empty now, but He is filling it with oil in the hidden moments, preparing the light for the perfect time to shine. You've been here before, haven't you? In this quiet, heavy space where the silence feels louder than any unanswered question. You poured out your heart, laid bare your deepest longing, perhaps even pleaded with tear-soaked words. And now, the calendar pages turn, the seasons shift, but the landscape of your life remains unchanged. You sit in the stillness, the air thick with the weight of what hasn't happened yet, and the question forms, unspoken but ever present. Do I keep praying? What's the point if nothing is changing? The wind outside taps gently against the window pane, a subtle reminder that God's presence isn't bound by the rush of your timeline, but waiting for the stillness of your heart. The temptation in the waiting is to simply stop praying, to let the silence from heaven be met with silence from your soul. But what if the waiting isn't a sign to cease communication, but a sacred invitation to change how you pray? This season, this prolonged pause, isn't about convincing God to speed up His clock. It's about inviting Him into the reality of your experience, and in doing so, allowing Him to align your heart with His eternal perspective. Consider the psalmists, figures whose raw, honest words echo through centuries. They didn't filter their feelings for divine consumption. They cried out, "How long, O Lord?" Psalm 13:1. They confessed their fear, their frustration, their sense of being forgotten in the wilderness of their circumstance. Why, O Lord, do you stand far away? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? Psalm 10:1. This is permission, whispered from ancient texts into your present moment. You are allowed to pray honest prayers. Lament is a language God understands intimately. Express the ache in your chest. Articulate the doubt that creeps into your mind like a shadow. Voice the frustration that coils in your gut. God isn't intimidated by your honesty. He is drawing near to meet you in the vulnerable truth of your struggle. But praying through the waiting isn't only about venting the storm within. It's also about charting a course through it, guided by faith. It's about moving from the raw, "How long?" to the quiet, profound, "Not my will, but yours." This is the prayer of surrender, echoing the garden agony of Christ Himself. It's not a passive giving up, but an active choosing of God's perfect wisdom over your limited understanding. It's the paradox of finding strength in relinquishing control. The unexpected freedom that blooms when you unclench your fists and release the reins you never truly held anyway. In the surrender, you aren't losing ground. You are giving the master weaver permission to continue his intricate, unseen work. And then there are the prayers of faith. I believe you are able. Even when the mountain hasn't moved, even when the Red Sea hasn't parted, even when the stone hasn't been rolled away, this declaration shifts the focus from the visible obstacle to the invisible power of the one who stands beside you. It's the tiny mustard seed of belief planted in the fertile ground of uncertainty, trusting that though you cannot yet see the full-grown tree, the potential is held secure in the Father's hand. It's choosing to see God's promises as more real than your present reality, anchoring your hope not in the shifting sands of circumstance, but on the bedrock of His unchanging character. Finally, praying through the waiting means cultivating prayers of gratitude, even for what remains unseen. Thank Him for the strength you didn't know you had to keep going. Thank Him for the lessons being learned in the crucible. Thank Him for the subtle shifts in your own heart, the quiet growth happening beneath the surface, like roots deepening in the soil during winter. Thank Him for the assurance that even when you feel disconnected, He is intimately involved, working all things together for your good, weaving a tapestry you only see a single thread of right now. This isn't about pretending the waiting isn't hard. It's about acknowledging that God is present in the hard and finding reasons to thank Him even there. Prayer in the waiting isn't a tool to manipulate God or accelerate His plans. It is the lifeline that keeps your soul tethered to the source of living water in the spiritual desert. It is the compass that realigns your heart towards His North Star when you feel utterly lost. It is the quiet discipline that transforms a season of stagnation into a journey of deeper intimacy. So don't stop praying. Change how you pray. Offer your honesty. Practice surrender. Declare your faith. Express your gratitude. For in praying through the waiting, you are not just enduring. You are becoming more like the one you trust, finding strength for the journey, and maintaining vital connection when you need it most. You check the clock again, not because you expect the answer to arrive on a schedule, but because the waiting itself feels like a thief, stealing minutes, hours, days. It drains you, doesn't it? This prolonged season in the wilderness of not knowing, where the path forward is shrouded in mist, and every step feels tentative, uncertain. You've prayed until the words felt dry on your tongue. You've wrestled with possibilities, running scenarios through your mind like frantic hands sorting sand, hoping to find a single grain of clarity. The exhaustion settles deep in your bones, a weariness that sleep cannot fully erase, a burden the strongest shoulders cannot permanently bear. It's in this very space, this point of near depletion, that God's ancient, tender invitation echoes. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. This isn't a dismissal of your situation, or a command to stop caring about the outcome. It's a divine invitation to lay down the weight of control. You cannot force the dawn. You cannot command the tides. And you cannot manufacture the answer to your prayers or dictate the divine timing. This weary striving, this desperate need to control the unfolding narrative is the heaviest burden of all. True rest in the unknown isn't about ceasing all effort. It's about ceasing the effort to control what is utterly beyond your grasp. It's acknowledging your finite limitations and choosing, moment by moment, to entrust the boundless. intricate orchestration of your life to the one who holds the cosmos in his hands. Imagine releasing the taut cord of anxiety, letting it slacken. Imagine silencing the frantic strategizing, the constant checking for updates, the endless internal debate. That stillness, that relinquishing, that is the beginning of sacred rest. It's a paradox. You find strength not by gripping tighter, but by letting go into his grip. He isn't asking for your frantic energy, just your quiet surrender. Lay down the heavy cloak of worry at the foot of the cross. Let the weary soul find refuge in the shepherd's care, trusting that even in the deepest unknown, his presence is the truest certainty. Rest here, even if the answers are still whispers on the wind. Rest in his capable care. You sit in the quiet room, the silence stretching out, heavy with the weight of unasked questions and unanswered prayers. You've laid it all out before God, the fear gnawing at your peace, the uncertainty clouding tomorrow, the desperate need for a sign, a clear word, a direction, anything. But the silence persists. It's a silence that can feel accusatory, like a door closed in your face. Your mind, however, is anything but silent. It races, a relentless whirlwind of worst-case scenarios, rehearsed anxieties playing on repeat, and the insidious echoes of doubt whispering that maybe, just maybe, God isn't hearing this time. Or perhaps he simply isn't there, present in this agonizing pause you find yourself in. The waiting feels less like a sacred space for growth and more like an empty, isolating void, where the noise of your own fear is the loudest sound. You strain your ears, searching for a clear signal, a divine directive, but find only the echo of your own apprehension. Yet sometimes, in the profound stillness of the waiting, God isn't absent. He is simply speaking in a different frequency, a softer tone than the one you're listening for. Remember the prophet Elijah, fleeing for his life, desperate for God to show up in undeniable power. He expected God in the spectacular, the overwhelming force of nature, the roaring wind that tore through mountains, the earth-shattering earthquake, the consuming fire. But God was not in the storm or the tremor or the blaze. He was found, incredibly, not in the expected demonstration of power, but in a still small voice. 1 Kings 19:11-12. A gentle whisper after the chaos had passed. When your soul is filled with the loud clamor of anxiety about the future, anticipating a dramatic intervention or a booming command, when God intends a quiet invitation, it becomes profoundly difficult to discern his gentle guidance right here, in the quiet present moment. Your internal noise drowns out his gentle call. Perhaps the waiting itself is not a punishment, a holding pattern, or proof of divine indifference, but a deliberate invitation. An invitation to quiet the insistent demands of your racing mind, to intentionally turn down the volume on your own fear-fueled narrative. It is a call to cultivate a new kind of attention, not straining to hear a booming command from the heavens, but learning to listen with a different kind of ear, to discern the subtle nudges, the quiet wisdom that settles within your spirit, the inexplicable sense of peace that somehow, miraculously, transcends all logical understanding. Philippians 4:7. This peace isn't a signal that the problem is gone. It is his presence walking with you right through the heart of it. He may not be handing you the entire, detailed map you so desperately desire, giving you the complete answer you think you must have right now to feel secure. Instead, He's often providing something far more precious and essential: directions for the very next step in the journey of waiting. The subtle thought that arises when you quiet yourself, the unexpected calm that remains amidst external chaos, the gentle prompting towards faith, kindness, patience, or simply sitting still, these are His whispers in the silence. To trust Him always means learning to discern that quiet voice, even when the world around you and the anxieties within your own heart feel overwhelmingly loud. He isn't asking you to conquer the waiting season by force. He's inviting you to learn to listen in it. The greatest strength in the wilderness is often found in stillness. You sit with the heavy cloak of waiting pulled tight around your shoulders. It's been so long. The dream you hold feels dusty. The prayer you whisper feels thin in the air. You see others moving forward, their lives unfurling like vibrant tapestries, while yours feels paused, a single, static frame in a film. The silence isn't just external, it echoes within, asking questions you can't answer. When? Why not me? It's insidious, this subtle shift. Without realizing it, the waiting begins to whisper your new name. You become the one who's still single, the one who can't find their purpose, the one whose finances are always a struggle, the one whose body hasn't healed, the one whose greatest desire remains just out of reach. The delay isn't just a circumstance you are navigating. It starts to feel like your very identity. It presses down, molding you into its shape, convincing you that this temporary state is the final destination, the sum total of who you are. But hear this truth, breathed from the very heart of the one who calls you beloved. Your identity is not the delay. It is not the job you haven't landed, the relationship you haven't found, the healing you haven't received, the door that remains shut. These are temporary scenes in a much grander, eternal story. They are chapters you are moving through, not the title of the book. The wilderness isn't your permanent address. It's a journey towards a promised land. Your true identity, the one stamped upon your soul before time began, is found solely and irrevocably in Christ. Remember the watermarks on ancient paper, unseen until held up to the light? Your identity in Him is that deep, that foundational. You are His child, adopted into the most secure family in existence. John 1:12. You are chosen, handpicked with divine intentionality before the world was even spoken into being, set apart not for what you do or have, but for who you are in Him. Ephesians 1:4. You are redeemed, bought back from every captivity by a love that paid the ultimate price. The silence might feel like rejection, the waiting like proof you are overlooked, but God's gaze upon you remains unwavering. He knows you fully, every fear, every longing, every tear shed in the quiet of your room. And He loves you not because you are perfect, not because your timeline matches His, but because you are His. His love is not earned by your progress. It is freely given in your belonging. This is the anchor that holds firm when the storm of uncertainty rages. Your worth is not tied to the fulfillment of your desires, but to the finished work of Christ on your behalf. The delay is a season, perhaps a long and challenging one, but it is a season you are passing through. It does not define the landscape of your soul. It may refine you, teach you patience, deepen your dependence on God, reveal hidden strengths you never knew you possessed, but it is not the sum total of who you are becoming. You are becoming more like Christ, day by day, moment by moment, even within the constraints of the waiting. The pressure of the delay can feel like it's crushing you, but sometimes pressure doesn't break, it forges. Perhaps the hardest paradox of waiting is that you feel most unseen when God is doing His deepest work within you. You feel forgotten when you are held most securely in His palm. The external circumstances scream one thing, while the quiet truth of your identity in Christ whispers another. Learn to listen to the whisper. It is the voice of your true home, your true nature. Anchor yourself in this truth. Your identity is secure in Christ. When the waiting tries to name you, speak your real name back to your soul. Beloved, chosen, redeemed, child of God. The delay is a path, not a cage. It is a chapter, not the final word. Hold fast to the promises He has spoken over you, not the stories your circumstances try to tell you about yourself. This is where resilience is born, not in the absence of waiting, but in remembering who you are while you are in it. Let this truth sustain you, empower you, and remind you that the best part of your story is not found in what happens to you, but in the one who holds you through it all. She sits by the window, watching rain stripe the glass, each drop a silent tick of the clock. Another day closes, the petition unanswered, the hope deferred feeling sharper than yesterday. You know this feeling. The gnawing doubt that perhaps your prayer was misplaced, your faith insufficient, or worse, that God simply didn't hear. The wait stretches into a landscape of dry expectancy, a wilderness where the promised land feels like a mirage. The human heart, so quick to measure by visible progress, falters in the face of divine patience. It's easy to believe when the answer is on the horizon. It is holy work to trust when the horizon is shrouded in mist, and only the memory of the promise remains. But let the ancient words echo, cutting through the silence of the wait. God is not a man that He should lie, or a son of man that He should change His mind. Has He said, and will He not do it? Or has He spoken, and will He not fulfill it? Numbers 23:19. This isn't a suggestion. It is the bedrock of existence, a truth so absolute it defies time and circumstance. God's promises are not flimsy hopes tied to the shifting sands of our emotions or the volatile markets of the world. They are anchored in the very essence of who He is, unchanging, utterly faithful, incapable of falsehood. Our waiting doesn't diminish His word. It often refines our capacity to receive it. The longest preparation can be the swiftest path to perfect timing. Even when the path ahead is shrouded in the darkness of delay, His word remains a lamp to your feet and a light to your path. Psalm 119:105. Not a floodlight showing the destination, but a gentle lamp illuminating the very next step. It guides you through the shadows of uncertainty, reassuring you that what He has promised, He will most certainly bring to pass. Your task isn't to see the end, but to trust the hand holding the lamp. Stand on the promise itself, even when you can't see its fulfillment. Rehearse the scriptures that declare His faithfulness, His unending provision, His relentless love. Let His spoken word become the solid ground beneath your weary feet. The waiting season is not empty time. It is hallowed ground where faith learns to lean not on sight, but solely on the character of the one who made the promise. Lean there. He will not, cannot fail you. The days blur into weeks, then months, sometimes years, as you hold a prayer in your heart. The mountain hasn't moved. The healing hasn't fully come. The situation remains stubbornly the same. You sit in the quiet ache of prolonged waiting, the silence echoing louder than any spoken word. It's easy to feel unseen, unheard, forgotten in the wilderness between the promise and the fulfillment. Doubt whispers insidious questions. Is God still there? Does he remember? But look closer, lean in lower. Even in the vastness of the wilderness, God provides manna. Not the promised land feast, not the rushing river yet, but daily, small, unexpected provisions. These are the glimpses of His grace along the way. They are not the full answer you hunger for, but they are bread for the journey, proof you are not walking alone. Perhaps it's the sudden, inexplicable wave of peace that washes over your anxious spirit in the middle of a storm of uncertainty. You didn't conjure it, it simply was, a whisper of God's calm in your chaos. Or maybe it's the unexpected phone call from a friend who shares a word of encouragement, so specific, it feels like it was sent straight from heaven. A direct address to the unspoken burden you carry. See the sunset, painting the sky in hues only a master artist could conceive? That breathtaking beauty isn't solving your problem, but it's an undeniable testimony to His creativity, His power, and His enduring care for the world He made, and for you, His child within it. Sometimes the glimpse is internal, a quiet certainty that settles in your spirit, a knowing that transcends logic, confirming that He is working, even behind the scenes. It's not loud or dramatic. It's a gentle anchor dropped into the turbulent waters of your soul. These moments are easy to dismiss. They're small. They don't fix everything. But they are divine breadcrumbs, left specifically for you on your path. Learn to recognize them. Cherish them. They are God's way of reminding you, tangibly, that He is present, His eye is on you, and His faithfulness is unfolding, often in ways too subtle for hurried eyes to see. They are proof that you are not forgotten in the waiting room of life. They are quiet foretastes, hints of the goodness and fulfillment that are yet to come, sustaining your spirit with today's portion of grace. The battle might still be raging, but His presence is a gentle paradox. A quiet roar in the silence, a profound visibility in the hiddenness. They are bread for today, preparing your heart for the promised harvest. The sun has dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of lavender and fading gold. You sit in the quiet, the weight of the unfulfilled day perhaps still settling upon your shoulders. The email didn't arrive. The call didn't come through. The breakthrough you longed for remains just beyond the veil of this moment. The silence is still here, yes, but perhaps its quality has shifted. It's no longer just an absence of sound or response. It feels more like a space, a pause. And in this pause, something unexpected begins to emerge. It's not the answer you craved, but a quiet realization. You are not the first to wait. You are walking a path trod by giants of faith. You encounter, in this stillness, the God who called Abraham into a promise, and then walked with him through years of childless delay. You meet the God who was with Joseph in the suffocating silence of a prison cell, holding the threads of a future he could not see. You journey with the God who led His people through 40 years in a howling wilderness, teaching them dependence with every sunrise and sunset. You recognize the God who was present even in the profound silence of the tomb, the darkest pause before the ultimate breakthrough. Faith, you are learning, isn't the ability to bypass the waiting room. It is the profound, sacred presence of trust in the waiting. It is the quiet, radical certainty that He is working, even when the evidence is hidden from your sight, like roots growing unseen beneath the earth. It is the conviction that He is speaking, even when all you hear is the soft hum of the world, a whisper waiting for your soul's stillness to perceive it. It is the unwavering belief that He is good, perfectly and absolutely good, even when your current circumstances feel anything but. This waiting, this pause, is not empty. It is not a void to be endured or merely survived. It is filled, though not always with the noisy activity we expect. It is filled with His potential, with lessons etched deep into the soul, with the quiet, unseen work of transformation. Like a seed buried in darkness, needing the patient soil and time before it bursts forth, your soul is being tended, strengthened, prepared in this quiet space. The peace you long for, the kind that settles deep within the bones, isn't found only when the waiting ends and the answer arrives. It can be discovered right here, in the sacred, sometimes challenging, pause. It is found as you learn to rest, not in the certainty of a timeline or an outcome you dictate, but in the absolute certainty of His unwavering love and His perfect cosmic wisdom. He is not late. He is not indifferent. He is faithful beyond measure. And even in this quiet moment, when the future feels distant and the present is still, His presence is a tender hand upon your heart, singing a lullaby of peace over your waiting soul. He is inviting you, gently, simply, to rest, to breathe, to trust, to know deep in your core that He holds you, holds this moment, holds your entire future securely, tenderly, faithfully in His hands. This quiet season is not wasted. It is a holy chapter in your story, authored by the one who never wastes a tear, never overlooks a longing, never forgets a promise. The pause itself is part of the journey, full of His grace, full of His presence, full of the quiet assurance that you are seen, you are held, you are loved, always. They didn't see the end, but they trusted the author, and that was enough.